But when you have a player that has pace, like Alado, it scares defenders. With Oloski, I think he thrives in the number 10 position. But you've got a player like Vasilev. I think players like him are absolutely priceless.
Welcome to our Philadelphia Union 2026 season preview. I'm Dave Leno, and I'm pleased to be joined by Apple TV broadcaster and a proud alum of our Union local TV broadcast, Danny Higginbotham. Danny, thank you so much for being here.
It's lovely. Yeah. It's lovely to be here, to see some old faces once again is great. It's always a pleasure.
It's always enjoyable doing this with you, Danny. You do a remarkable job on Apple TV with many of your colleagues who are dear friends. I want to start off by saying first, how's the offseason going? I know it's a big year upcoming for the World Cup, and you have a lot of big broadcasts ahead for yourself as well.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's been nice. I've had a little bit of a break, obviously, since MLS start's been doing, the Premier League with NBC. But it's been nice to have a little bit of a break, but you can just feel everything's just starting to, which I'm sure has been the same for you. Everything's starting to pick up now. You see the fixtures coming out, and all of a sudden it's like it flies by, and before you know it, the season will be starting.
Well, I'm just like you and a lot of our viewers. We're revved up for this 2026 season. Tons of storylines. I want to begin with the Union and first harken back to last year. The 20 wins, 8 on the road, 66 points, capturing the second Shield in club history. But how the Union changed the narrative as the season waned? From the start, a lot of question marks, and then how it finished. How does that almost parallel from what is taking place at the start of this year with so many guys that departed the team, and we have a lot of newcomers as well?
Yeah, it is very similar. Obviously, there's not a change of management, which is a huge thing with Bradley Carnell going into his second season. But I go back to this time last year. I didn't know what to expect from Philadelphia Union. Bradley Carnell, I knew him from St. Louis and always had a huge amount of respect for him. But then you had players leaving, and there was a lot of change. And I'll be the first one to admit what Philadelphia Union did last season, I didn't see it coming, and I even mentioned that to Bradley Carnell. But what I thought he did really well was, a lot of people were saying when the hot months come, when the heat comes, it's going to be very difficult. But he was very, very good, very clever, whichever way you want to look at it, in terms of being able to rotate the squad. And I think when you now fast forward it to this season, there's been a lot of change. A lot of senior players have gone, a lot of key players have gone. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this unfolds, because obviously they've made a few signings, and I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Yeah, one of those signings is a new club record transfer fee in Ezekiel Alado, coming from the top division in Sweden. Had 8 goals over 32 appearances across all competitions. Watching a ton of tape on him, Danny, pace, physical, is going to have that rapid speed up front. What have you seen on tape from Ezekiel Alado, and what can Union fans expect this go-around? And it's going to be his first foray in MLS, a totally different league.
Yeah, I think similar to what you're saying, I think he's got pace, but he also has the physical stature as well. I think one-on-one he's going to be electric. He's going to be very difficult to play against. And one of the things I would say with Philadelphia Union, because they're a team that love to play in transition, they love to play in the counter-attack. They can play some wonderful possession-based football, which we saw last year with, I think it was a goal they scored away at Montreal, was just one of the goals of the season. But when you have a player that has pace, like Alado, it scares defenders. And you do one of two things. You play a high line while you're leaving space in behind, he's going to get into it. Or if you drop off, then all of a sudden, another key element for Philadelphia Union is your 2 number 10s. They're afforded extra time and space. So I feel as though you always have to have a centre forward that can stretch the game. Uwe did it exceptionally well while he was here, because you can talk about the skills that a centre forward may have, or a winger. For me as a former player, the thing that scared me more than anything was pace. Because if you were playing against someone that was quicker than you had to give yourself a yard or two depending on where the ball was, or you got really tight to them so they couldn't turn. So from a defender's side of things, it's very difficult, because you can drop deep, but if you're dropping deep, you're creating space for the 2 number 10s or the fullbacks to get forward and advance. So it looks as though he's going to be a very good signing, but more importantly, it looks as though he complements the players that are already at the club.
It's a great point. And look, he's only 20 years old as well. It's going to be his first year in MLS. A guy that had his first year in the league last year, Bruno Damiani, finished with 7 goals. Another young player as well for the Union up front. What's that partnership going to be like in your eyes, between the differences in the way Damiani does, maybe more so with the hold-up play, and the vertical threat that Alado can bring?
Yeah, I think it has the makings of a very good partnership. I don't think Damiani got the respect and credit that he deserved last year, because people will always look at a centre forward and talk about goals. But the amount of times he was the focal point, the amount of times that he would be involved in a play without actually touching the ball, because he would move defenders out of the way that he was able to link up. And I think he deserved more credit than what he got last year from certain situations, because centre forwards, a lot of the time, they are judged on scoring goals. But in this scenario, If you've got a centre forward that wants to drop deep and you've got a centre forward that wants to stretch the game, then it can be a match made in heaven. You look at great centre forward partnerships, you look at great central midfield partnerships, great centre back partnerships. One's weakness is another one's strength. If you've got two centre forwards that play exactly the same way, they're going to get in each other's way. So in an ideal world, you want one that's going to drop a little bit deeper to maybe link up, but then you want one that's going to stretch the game, because then it becomes a problem for defenders. And I think pace is something that is absolutely key, and it's a must for a Philadelphia Union team that, like I say, they love to go from front to back really quickly when they win the ball back.
And you mentioned the DNA of this team, and I think of chaos. The press. Sometimes the press will look different. Sometimes the press will go more into the channels. Maybe it will go at the top of the box. But I think it's the commitment too, Danny, right, of bringing a guy like Alado, that he needs to have the work ethic of Damiani and others as well in the team, that when Bradley and the coaching staff say to go, they're going to release and high press, and he's got to bring in that mindset. And I think that's exactly what will take place this year.
That would be, I'm sure, if you spoke to Bradley Carnell, I'm sure that he would say it's a non-negotiable. Because when you look at it, and you can look at it teams throughout the world, a high line only works if there's a high press. So, for example, if it's, I don't know, say you and me are playing as centre forwards, okay? We lose the ball. If we don't immediately go and press, that means that the opposition can play out. If the opposition can play out, it means they can get their head up and they can play telling passes in behind the centre-backs, down the sides of the centre-backs. So the idea is that, and I thought Philadelphia Union were exceptional last season, if you lose the ball, you press, but you don't press individually. You press collectively. So therefore, if you press collectively, the defender has two options. Either goes back to his goalkeeper, the threat of the counter-attack is gone, or he's in such a hurry that he just plays an aimless ball forward. So it's absolutely vital that the two centre forwards, two number 10s, probably one of the central midfielders, in Danley, even a fullback that's involved, it's so important that they press, because if they don't press, then all of a sudden the back line will be vulnerable and can get outnumbered. But they did that incredibly well last season. And I think what happened is the results came along, an unbelievable start to the season. Belief then starts to set in. And I think from Bradley Carnell's perspective, when he would have spoken to the players last season, he would have been like, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it. But for a player, the way you get a buy-in from the players is the results on the field. And they got the results early, therefore the players buy in and they know what to expect.
They sure did. Look, they started 3-0. I remember calling that game down in Orlando. That surprised everybody. Eventually went unbeaten in 13 across all competitions. And they just had a fantastic finish. They were very resilient, especially after kind of that topsy-turvy game in Vancouver, how they finished the season. And you mentioned the pressing, too. I think back to the game on the road that you called for Apple, the Chicago game, what led to, the press led to
Incredible.
2 goals for the Union. I believe one for Baribo and the other for Damiani. So looking forward to seeing that this year. You mentioned the back line and bringing in a new guy in Jafet Seri Larsen, coming from the first division in Norway, a Danish youth international. Danny, what I'm hearing is he brings in a ton of leadership as well. What do you see? Because you and I speak a lot about partnerships. What do you foresee between him and Owatu Makanya, center backs for the 2026 Union, if that's the pairing?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to have a centre back that's comfortable playing with space behind him, because that's the way that Philadelphia Union play. So it's sort of a knock-on effect. So if we go back to the previous talking point, which is if your front five are looking to press really high, but your defence is worried about pace, then all of a sudden you have your front five here, you have your midfield here in no man's land, having to cover so much ground, and you have your back four or back two, whatever you want to call it here. So all of a sudden the pitch becomes huge, and that is a huge problem. Whereas with Larsen, he's quick. I think technical ability, he can pick a pass as well, and it's so important that you're able to do that, especially when you're playing with two number 10s. And I think the biggest thing is you look at Makanya, who was absolutely outstanding last season. I thought one of the best centre-backs in the league. Him and Glesner had a great partnership, but it was a real breakthrough season for Makanya. So now you look at it and think, right, okay, your new centre-back is coming in Larsen. Does he complement Makanya? So the idea from that is that you have to have two centre-backs that are comfortable knowing that there's space behind him. For everything that I know is in terms of Larsen, he's quick, so he's not going to be worried about that spacing behind him. But it becomes vital because you want to build partnerships. I always look at a football team like a tree. Okay, so you're going through the middle, that's the strongest point of the team. Your branches either side, you can chop and change them when needed. But going all the way through the middle, it's massive. And what Philadelphia Union have been able to do so far, Danley and Lukic, one of the best central midfield partnerships in the league, they're still intact. The centre-forward partnership has obviously been dismantled, likewise with the centre-back partnership. So it's really important that the new players that we've already mentioned, they get bedded in, they get to know their surroundings, and the hope is that not only are they good players, not only do they fit the system, but they make the players around them better as well.
You're right on the money, because that Danley-Lukic partnership, I don't think enough people around the league talked about them. I know you did, but there's others that they really held it down in the middle of the pitch for the team. What I loved is just the tenacity to get forward, but also to help back with it, because we talk about partnerships all the time. For Danley and Lukic, I remember Lukic hit a screamer early on in the season, and everybody was going crazy at Subaru Park. Danley can get forward. It's a big season for Danley too, personally, because Haiti qualifying for the World Cup for the first time since 1974. So I'm thinking of Danley and the Haitian nation as well. This go-around obviously wants to rep the Union badge really well in 2026, but it's going to be year two for Lukic too. When teams tried to break down the Union, when they had a ton of possession and tried to make a lot of consecutive passes, what did Danley and Lukic, in your mind, how did they put out fires so well last year?
I think when you talk about partnerships, and in an ideal world, you want opposites. You want one person's strength is the other person's weakness, or like that to a certain extent. Then you get the all-round midfielder in that sort of position. I think what Danley did extremely well, eventually teams started sitting deeper against Philadelphia Union. His late runs were incredible. When he gets into his stride, he is so good at it. And because what Philadelphia Union were doing, because they were sort of stretching the game in specific parts of the field, what was happening was whether it be Damiani, whether it be Uwa, whether it be Baribo, what they would do, because they were stretching the games at times, all of a sudden the gap between the opposition and defence became really big. And that's where Danley loved to get into. He was so good at getting behind opposition midfield, and then all of a sudden he's onto the back four, and then the knock-on effect from that is one of your centre-backs has to release themselves. The second they release themselves to Danley, well, one of your centre-forwards is free. So I think that's something that they have to look to carry on. I think what I like about Lukic is his defensive side of the game is in terms of knowing where to be at all times, being able to put out fires, like you've said, but he also has the ability to pick a pass. And if Danley wants a little bit of a break, then Lukic can get forward. But what I find fascinating about this season that's coming, you look at Danley, okay, he was at the club previous to last season, but he wasn't playing in the system that he was in. So you look at Danley, you look at Lukic, you look at Macania. Those three in particular, outstanding last season. It was their first season. Now teams are going to be aware of them. And it's how you have to not necessarily alter what you're doing because it gave them great success, but maybe just adjust a few different things, because teams are now going to be like, we need to stop Danley. We need to stop Lukic. How can we drag Macania out of his position because he's so good defensively? And that's where you've seen the difference between good players and great players. And if they're able to carry on and have the second season similar to the first season, you're in a really good place, because now all of a sudden, in different areas of the field, they become danger men, whether it's how can we avoid him so we can get a quicker route to goal? How can we stop Danley's runs? How can we stop Lukic dictating the tempo of the game? And that's what Philadelphia Union, they're going to come up against now, because teams are going to be very wary of them. I think at the start of last season, teams are like, Philadelphia Union, they've lost certain players, they've lost a certain traditions in terms of Jim Curtin being here. So I don't think teams respected Philadelphia Union early on in the season. They will do this season. It's going to be completely different because of what they did last season.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the metamorphosis of Danley and Lukic with more playing time with the Union and here in MLS. Now, there is fair questions from the fan base, and you and I have spoken about this off camera, and that's with the back line, right? When you lose a guy in best 11 player, former defender of the year in Jacob Glesnes that we talked about, also Kai Wagner here for 7 years, and Kai, no doubt, was a fulcrum for getting a slew of chances, a lot of chance creation with his crossing ability, also dead ball restarts as well. What is the plan that you foresee the Union making in 2026 as it relates to left back and having that width moving forward without a Kai Wagner?
I think it's huge. I think it's really big, because I think you can get away with certain plays in certain fullback positions in terms of having a right for a left back or a left for a right back, depending on the system that you're using. But if you look at Philadelphia Union, it's a 4-2-2-2. So therefore you've got a 6 and an 8. Predominantly they can become two number 6s. Then you've got two number 10s. But those two number 10s aren't necessarily asked to drift wide all the time. They're asked to basically keep narrow. So therefore, your width has to come from your fullbacks. Now, I know from personal experience, if I'm a left back, traditionally, naturally left-footed, and I'm asked to go and play right back, I'm going to be more inverted. So I'm not going to give you a great amount of width. So therefore, we can look at Harriel, you can look at Westfield, two outstanding players, without doubt. But I think naturally to have a natural left-footed left back, for me, that is, I think that's vital, especially with the way that Philadelphia Union play, because we saw with Kai Wagner, I'm not expecting to get a like-for-like replacement for him because he was arguably, I wouldn't even say arguably, okay, people will talk about Alba, but I think arguably year after year after year, he was the most consistent and probably best left back in MLS. And I don't think there'd be many arguments against that. But he had the ability to go up and down all game. And the situation is, when you're playing with this system, the space is there for the fullback to go forward because the rest of the team is really narrow. We know Philadelphia Union love to get crosses into the box. So one of two things happen. If you're a right footer playing left back, a lot of the times if you're not confident on your left foot, you're going to go down the line, you're going to cut back onto your right foot. I know from experience, if I'm playing with a centre forward, they'll get really frustrated from that because you'll cut back to go onto your right foot, centre forward's got to change their run again. It means the defensive line can play a little bit higher. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a naturally left-footed left back come in. That's nothing to say that Harriel or Westfield can't play left back. I just think when I look at them both at right back, obviously it's so much better because you can give that width and your tendency is to drift wide rather than to drift in field.
And I want to give Harriel and Westfield a lot of credit because they also played, as you know, that left back position. I think Nate played all four spots on the back line last year too. So I'm looking forward to 2026 for those two guys. Danny, how important was it for the club to bring in Janer Martinez and also Finn Sundstrom from North Carolina FC to aid to the center back depth this season?
Huge. Absolutely. It's massive. I can speak from my own sort of circumstances when I was playing, whether it be centre back or whether it be playing left back. If you look at it, when Philadelphia Union just had the two centre-backs, if anything happened to those centre-backs, then the likelihood is it was probably going to be Harriel or it was going to be Westfield that were probably going to be asked to come and play in the centre-back position, more so Harriel. We know that he's played there. So I think that's really important then. What that means is that full-backs can concentrate on being full-backs and centre-backs can concentrate on being centre-backs. I think with the workload, the amount of games that there is as well, there has to be a time when you can give players a break in specific games. And I think what you'll hear from a lot of people is that back fours you don't like to mess around with, as in terms of if you can have that stability. And that's all well and good, but suspensions will occur, injuries will occur, loss of form can occur as well. So I think it's really important that in an ideal world you have two players for every position, and some of those players can play multiple positions. And I think if you have that, then you have different things that you can lean back on. And what I would add on top of that as well is competition within competition. Yes, you have competition against opposition teams, but if there's four centre-backs in the team and they're competing for two spots, it's amazing what it can do for individuals' progress.
You speak about versatility, and two players that come to mind that one I think is going to have even a bigger role this year now in his first full year with the Union, and that's Milani Lasky. Yeah. You know, coming in from Nordsjælland and also from San Diego, I think with the Union, 5 goals, 4 assists with this team. How do you see even a different role for Milan or maybe similar at that 10 position, or if he plays up top at the number 9 this year as well, depending on how Bradley and the staff want to go for Lasky and Indy Vasilev's another player that comes to mind too that Bradley, of course, brought in from St. Louis and knows very well.
I think versatility is so important now in football. I don't think there's any question about it because teams play different systems in possession and out of possession, and you've got to have the ability to be able to do that. You look at Philadelphia Union, for example, a lot is required from the two number 10s. Yes, you're two number 10s when you've got the ball, but when you lose the ball, it becomes more of a 4-4-2. So your number 10s have to become wingers. So they have to have the ability to do that. With Oloski, I thought he got better and better as the season went on. He can play in the centre forward position. Personally, myself, when I've seen him, I think he thrives in the number 10 position. But then we go back to players around him making him a better player by creating space for him. If you've got a centre forward that we're talking about now that's going to end up stretching the game, all of a sudden instead of him having 3 or 4 seconds on the ball, you may be talking 6 or 7 seconds on the ball, and that for a player of Oloski's quality is so important because that then enables him to take that extra touch, then he can make that pass through. So I think it's vital. I think he's in for a really big season, and I think the beauty of with Bradley Carnell, you can send out a starting 11, But you can keep the opposition guessing until the game starts, because there's a number of players that can play the right-sided number 10, the left-sided number 10, a centre forward, a number 10, a centre back, a right back. So I think what you can do, you can keep a number of teams guessing, like I say, before the game even begins, and it can give them a problem that they have to solve in the first 15, 20 minutes of games. And at times it can be difficult if you're not sure completely where a player's playing.
Restarts, just the shooting ability also from the top of the box from Ilosky. And I talked to the coaching staff about this a lot last year. Danny, you know better than me, but not a really big take back with his leg forward, just a powerful strike that I saw from Milan that maybe the Union didn't have. You know, that of course everybody was imploring Glesnes in the past to shoot, as you know, from distance. But I think Ilosky kind of brings that little bit of a different look in the final third. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Milan will flourish this year for the club. I mentioned Indy Vassilev a moment ago, and I just wanted to ask you, just from your playing experience, how much is that an extension of Bradley out there and what Indy did under Bradley in St. Louis and the production that he had as well? I remember that goal in Montreal. I believe it was his first goal for the Union that he scored. I think it was in the second minute. A very quick goal, which a very Union-like goal last year. What did you like so much about Indy Vassilev, and how do you see him playing in 26?
I think players like him are absolutely priceless. Absolutely priceless, because from a manager's perspective, they want if a manager can have versions of himself on the field, you're in a great place, because we know what it's like, whether Philadelphia Union playing at home or they're playing away. Atmospheres can be incredible. Now, you can have a manager on the sideline, he can be shouting to a player, and the player can be like, I can't hear you, what are you saying? So if you've got players already on that field, and this is why the beauty of this second year can be massive, because the players know what's expected of them. But you've got a player like Vassilev, how he can sort of get the message across, because he's played under Bradley Cornell for so long now. It's massive. It's absolutely huge. And to add on to that, you look at the players that you've lost. Glesnes, Wagner, Baribo, players like that, they were leaders within their own rights. So from me as an outsider looking in, I want to see some of these younger players now take that next step, become more vocal, become leaders. And Vassilev, obviously, he's a little bit older, but it's a role that he has to take as well. You've still got players like Andre Blake, unbelievable leader, but he's in goal. Sometimes he can't get the messages higher up the field. You've got Bedoya, who for me is one of the most important signings of the off-season. I think it was huge that they got him, not just because of what he can do on the field, but his effects off the field with the younger players as well, helping them to become leaders. So I think that's going to be absolutely huge. And I think Vassilev falls into that category. I think he's a leader in his own right, and he's obviously a little bit older. But I think if he can rub off on some of the younger players, that becomes absolutely huge, because any team that has success, they have leaders on the field in all different positions. And it's a manager's dream. It's a manager's dream to be able to look at a group of players on the field and go, they can't hear me, but you know what? I trust them to be able to fix this problem themselves. And we saw that from Philadelphia Union at times last season. When things were going against them, they were able just to sort of take a little bit of a step back and go, right, okay, we reset ourselves and we go again.
Trust is that key word, because last year, where a lot of the pundits were saying, they're kind of writing the Union off.
I was the first one. I'll admit it.
No, listen, they they proved it out on the pitch, right? And you saw it calling the games, talking to the staff, as did the rest of the world, quite frankly. And it comes to mind, calling the games on radio, just how close this group was, and that belief. In fact, last year, they didn't lose more than 2 consecutive games throughout 2025. I mean, to me, that's remarkable for the type of team, and I think that brings in the guy to my mind is like a Bedoya, like a Blake. I know Nate Harriel stepped into more of a veteran presence. Larson as well, we heard, was brought in. It was a vice captain right for his prior club. And now brought into the leadership, even as a new guy. So you have young guys, and how about the maturation of Andrew Rick getting more playing time? And will there be even more for Rick? Will there be even more for a Kevin Sullivan, going from 10 minutes 2 years ago to 210 minutes for the first team last year, 11 games? Could there be more this year? And, of course, there's a plan in place. And then Quinn Sullivan comes to mind as well, a guy that's aggressively rehabbing the ACL. So the depth, versatility, there are big themes throughout this preview show. Danny, I do want to end this preview show by asking you about rotation, your perspective in what's to come for this team, because the team is back in CONCACAF Champions Cup. From Clearwater, Florida, they're going to Trinidad and Tobago to take on Defense Force FC in mid-February. We'll have leg 2 here, in the first game of the regular season is the 21st at DC. How do you surmise Bradley and the staff managing the rotation? What games maybe to emphasize, and others maybe to give some other guys an opportunity?
It's a difficult one, because you speak to different managers, and different managers will say, well, when is the next time that we're going to be in this competition? So we have to give it everything we've got in this competition. If the league form is, a bit hit and miss early on in the season, we will deal with that, because we know that we're in the league every single year. Whereas the other competition, it's like not everybody gets in there. So it's a very, very difficult one to manage, because you've got a group of players and you've got a team that realistically they would still be in pre-season. So you're going from a pre-season scenario and you're playing against teams that have sort of been going for a while, a lot of them. So you're playing catch up there, and we've seen it from teams. I think if my memory serves me correctly, Cincinnati, we saw it with Cincinnati. I think we've seen it previously with Philadelphia Union, maybe Seattle as well. And I think Columbus. Form took a little bit of a hit in MLS, but it was like, this is a competition that we believe we can go far, and we don't know the next time we're going to be in this competition. So from Bradley Cornell's perspective, it can be difficult, because you have to manage minutes whilst also trying to be competitive, because pre-season, I always said, when I got to the end of pre-season, so in England, when we were starting in the Premier League, if the season started August, I could honestly say that it would be 5 or 6 games till I felt truly match fit. Because you can play all the preseason games that you want, but when it gets going and the games then become competitive, it takes you a little bit of time to get that match fitness. So now what you've got with Philadelphia Union is that they're part way through their preseason, and all of a sudden they're playing these important games. So it's a difficult one for a manager, and you hit the nail on the head when you say it's about balance. It's about making sure that players aren't going into these games potentially going to get injured because they're not in the right fitness state, but also making sure that players are getting enough minutes that they aren't rusty, but making sure players don't get too many minutes where they're, I'm not saying burnt out, but can be liable, to get injured. So it's a very, very tough balancing act, and I think we've seen from numerous MLS teams doing it certain ways. There doesn't seem to be one right way. It's what suits the team, and it's what suits the coaching staff, and it's what suits the players.
And Danny, speaking of the busy stretch, the Union season starts in CONCACAF Champions Cup play on the 18th in Trinidad and Tobago against Defense Force FC. Then they come back to the States for the regular season opener on the road in our nation's capital in D.C. Have a game on the 26th at home in leg 2 against the Trinidad and Tobago team. And then you round out the first 4 for the regular season home opener on March 1st against New York City FC, where the club looks to avenge that playoff loss. What realistic expectations would you say Union fans should have for the start of this season?
I think it's very difficult. You've just mentioned the games there. They are 2 very, very tough games in terms of MLS. And then you've also got CONCACAF Champions Cup in between it. And I'll say what I said previously. I think if it's me, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm maybe the manager or the coach, I'm thinking to myself, you don't know when you're next going to be in a CONCACAF Champions Cup. And I think a lot of coaches have looked at it that way. And they've been willing to sort of say, okay, it may be a somewhat slow start in MLS, but they want to go as far as they can in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is understandable, because it's not a competition that you're guaranteed to be in every season. And I think we saw that last year. Philadelphia Union didn't have to worry about that. Look at the start they had to the season, where there was other teams that were more highly fancied than Philadelphia Union. They had a tough start because they did have the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And I think if we rewind the clock 12 months, I think a lot of fans would have been like, what's going to happen with this Philadelphia Union team? Myself, from the outside looking in, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen with this Philadelphia Union team. Obviously, Jim Curtin had come in, had gone, Bradley Cornell came in. There was chopping and changing with players. And I don't think the expectations were high. But then look what happened. And then everybody was just waiting, this is going to end soon, this is going to end. And it just didn't. And they thoroughly deserved to win the Supporters' Shield, without question. They were the best team all the way through. Then there was the question marks in the middle of summer. This weather's going to affect them now. It's going to affect them because they play high pressing and they play with all this energy. Didn't affect them whatsoever. So I think if you're a Philadelphia Union fan at the moment, I think you look back at last season, you think to yourself, okay, what were the expectations then? Obviously, the expectations are going to be higher now from what they did last season. There's new players that have come into the club. I'm sure there's going to be more new players coming into the club as well. It will be a tough start because you're juggling two competitions, and it's how then Bradley Carnell goes about it, because whichever way you do it, it's not easy. It's not easy to sort of have that balancing act early on in the season, but you would expect if they can get through that area and some more new players come in, they could have another really good season.
Well, we know it's going to be a thrilling ride to start the season. I can't wait for it all. I can't thank you enough, Danny, for your time, your perspective, and your insight today. This was a lot of fun. Just like we were doing it on local TV.
My pleasure as always.
Hopefully we can do it again. Thank
Definitely.
you again, Danny.